Judiciary Committee, we're glad to have all of you with us today. Brady, how about call the roll?
Hill.
Here.
Wadsworth. Here. England. Here. Almond. Bedsole. Chestnut.
Here.
Faulkner. McClammy. Pettis. Robbins.
Here.
Simpson. Here. Standridge. Here. Starnes. Here. Stringer. Tillman. Here. We have a quorum.
Okay. We got a quorum. Ladies and gentlemen, we got several bills that we're going to carry over. We will talk to you about those later. But we got two public hearings that we are going to go ahead. We're going to have those. But before we get going, just sort of as a personal note, we've got retired United States Congressman Spencer Backus with us. If those are, stand up, please, Representative Backus. That's true. That's true. And also represented the area where I was the city attorney, and so I had many experiences with him over the years. But it's good to have you with us. Thank you for coming.
You do not have the staff that you need in your job. I've always told people that my service in the legislature was harder than Congress, because I was in Congress. I had 35 people on my staff to answer letters and talk to constituents, and you don't have that resource. And so if anybody knows the sacrifice you make every day, I do. And I appreciate your service.
We really appreciate you being with us, and you could remedy that problem by making a few phone calls to your buddies up there and get us some money sitting down here. But be that as it may, we'll continue on. But we are glad to have you with us. Thank you for being here. First thing we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is House Bill 118. It's a public hearing. Representative Garrett, would you explain your bill, and then we will let folks that are going to speak for it or against it. Again, that's all we're going to do today, folks. We're not going to take amendments to this bill. If there are any, I don't know. We'll certainly let the committee members ask any questions they wish, but we're going to listen to what people have to say for it. We're going to listen to what people have to say against it, and we're going to take it up next week for a vote. Okay? Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Congressman Backus, good to see you. I feel like I've been set up. I'm the budget chair. I feel like that was a lobby for some additional funding for somebody. I don't know. But anyway, appreciate your comments and your service to our state for many years. This bill has to do with the home inspectors. I realize going in, there's a lot of tension between, all of us have a home inspector story, I think, probably. This bill is not designed to change the liability, reduce the insurance requirement, or reduce their licensing requirement. Here's what it's trying to accomplish. Home inspectors have a 7-year liability period, which is extensive compared to other type industries, I think. But what they do often is they're being misused, I think, as warranties rather than just home inspector things. So, for example, if a home inspector does a home inspection and says, as part of the inspection report, this washing machine is probably going to go out within a year, refrigerator might go out within a year, heating and air may go out within a year, and then say a year and a half comes by or a year and 2 months come by and it goes out, they'll get a claim for that item. And even though it's outside the scope of what they had initially reported in the report, what happens in practice is they just end up having to file a claim to cover that. So the insurance rates tend to go up. They tend to go up dramatically. What this is just trying to do is just basically say that the law that's on the books, it's one sentence. The legislature does not intend by the inclusion of the foregoing requirement, everything we just expressed, to express public policy disfavoring contractual limitations of liability between home inspectors and their customers. So if a home inspector enters into a contract with a customer to do a home inspection, that's there. Down the road, they can still be sued, they can still be challenged, but they can't say in court that the law automatically does not recognize the contractual agreement they had with their customer. That's the intent of the bill. That's all it does. Thank you.
Yes, sir. My name is Joseph Cox. I'm an attorney from Tuscaloosa. I represent the Alabama Home Inspectors Organization. Yes, sir. All right. May it please the committee. The reason I am here is because I grew up with a home inspector down the street and have grown up knowing about their industry and understanding what they do. And without obviously asking y'all for a show of hands, it's been my experience that probably all of y'all, when you bought a home or a family member bought a home, got a home inspection. The home inspection typically is a 2 to 4 hour walk around. The fees tend to be $350, $400, something of that nature. The reason I am here is because we are seeing a lot of litigation against home inspectors where they are put in the position of essentially being warrantors on this house, and that's not what they signed up for. They signed up to do a visual inspection. There's a standard of certain standards of what they report on, and those are set forth in the law, and there's also administrative guidance as to what they do. I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to talk to you about the law. I understand y'all are all pretty much familiar with the legal system, so that's good. The issue we're having is there was a case that came out of the Alabama Supreme Court several years ago dealing with limitations of liability, where it suggested that if there was an insurance requirement, that there was a public policy disfavoring limitations of liability. I talked to the president of the largest home inspection insurance company, and there's only 431 licensees, so this is not a big industry. But they have 38% of the inspectors in this state. They encourage limitations of liability, but sometimes they're not being enforced. We're not here to have the legislature take a position on whether they're enforceable. That's going to be decided down the street at the Alabama Supreme Court. What we're asking is for this body to clarify that they are not against allowing freedom of contract and allowing the question of enforceability to be decided at the Alabama Supreme Court. But the issue is any given year, 18% of home inspectors will have an insurance claim. 18%. That's 2 out of 5. There is a case in New Jersey that came out several years ago in which the New Jersey Supreme Court had a similar doctrine in place about public policy. The New Jersey Supreme Court said that the legislature had an insurance requirement. Therefore, we're going to find that these contractual limitations of liability are unenforceable. Well, Mr. Jeff Hill, president of Inspector Pro, which is a subsidiary of Citadel Insurance, they don't write insurance in New Jersey. He suggests that if somebody needs to get insurance in New Jersey, they may have to go to Lloyd's of London. Now, that's the way it was 30 years ago, too, when they couldn't get insurance. If they get 2 or 3 claims, they're having trouble getting reinsured. One of the largest insurance companies for this industry, Great American Insurance, pulled out last year and said that they are not going to issue insurance policies to home inspectors. So it is a point of fact that this industry may very well rely on the ability to simply, home inspections are not required, but if you choose to have one, to have the freedom of contract to meet with somebody and negotiate those terms. This is not a large industry where there's no bargaining power. Almost all home inspectors are independent mom and pop sort of operations. You may have 2 or 3 clumped together, but it's not a situation where somebody's being handed a set of terms and conditions. I understand there may be some opposition to this bill from people in the real estate industry. I'm not sure it's the rank and file people who refer to real estate or refer to home inspectors regularly, but maybe from the industry head. I don't understand it. I pulled their own standard contract. It says that they shall not be liable for any claims, demands, actions, claims, lawsuits, or claims arising from the sale of the property, including but not limited to heating, cooling, plumbing, water, electrical systems, et cetera. So that industry already uses a very similar language in their own contract. And frankly, I don't think it would be in their customers' interest for us to have an industry that can't exist because it can't get insurance. And so I'm here asking for a fix. All I'm saying is, not saying let's make home inspectors not liable for anything if they make a mistake, but I'm saying let's not end up in a situation where the Alabama Supreme Court issues a decision one day and we have an industry in tumult. And that's why we're asking for this one sentence to be included. The legislature does not intend, by the inclusion of the foregoing insurance requirement, to express public policy disfavoring contractual limitations of liability. The Alabama Supreme Court has already enforced provisions like that for other industries, including the termite industry and the alarm companies. Other industries have similar language and protections. That's all we're asking for. We think it's a fix. We think it doesn't really diminish or expand liability out there. We think that other industries are already using this, and how we got in the situation of having this requirement maybe as a smaller industry, that's what happened. But we'd like to be proactive and try and make sure this industry goes on and continues to serve the people and not have to pass along some exorbitant fee in terms of some insurance from London or not be insurable.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Cox? Yes, sir, Mr. Simpson, please.
I'm just, I represent Baldwin County, so just to kind of put that out there of what you have. When we deal with hurricanes all the time with home inspectors and everything they have to go through from the aspect of what you have. My concern, and tell me if I'm wrong, please walk me through this because I'm not an expert in this business. If your home inspector is walking through the property and you're asking them to inspect the roof, inspecting, how the house is built, the foundation of the house, what's going on. If you have a home inspector that just does a poor job, and I'll tell you, I'm a lawyer as well. There are bad lawyers, there are bad judges, and I'm not looking at Judge Hill, but there's bad people in the profession no matter what profession that we have. If a home inspector misses something, that homeowner is not going to know because that homeowner is not going to be able to go behind that home inspector and follow through and say, oh, wow, there is a big gap right there. That is not connecting as part of the house. I paid the home inspector to come and inspect and make sure we have these problems. But if the home inspector misses it, then you're just, what reliability does that homeowner have? Because they're saying, I paid a home inspector to come in and inspect and make sure we didn't have these problems. And if the home inspector misses that problem, they're not going to know until that's a problem. Because unless you create this sub-industry of the inspector to follow the home inspector to make sure that, you have two inspectors to make sure what you have. So the homeowner is not going to be able to see everything that the expert home inspector would be able to see. And they won't know it's a problem until it becomes the problem. So if we have a hurricane down there and it has to rip apart the roof and somebody comes in and says, well, this roof was patchwork anyway, it was never put together correctly, it wasn't connected the right way, you would be removing the home inspector from any kind of liability in through this. Is that correct?
No, sir. What we are requesting is merely that the legislature clarify that by requiring insurance, that it did not intend that the Alabama Supreme Court or whoever would necessarily invalidate a contractual limitation. So I think this body would be taking a neutral position on that issue.
I don't think it's a neutral position, and the reason why I don't think it's a neutral position, and I think that's a dishonest argument, is because you're up here asking for us to take this position. This position that we have in lighting the language of the substitute, the legislature does not intend by the inclusion of the foregoing requirement to express public policy disfavoring contractual limitations of liability between home inspectors and their customers. That's the language you're asking. So if the Supreme Court looks at the contract and the contract language says home inspector is not liable, then you're going to use this clause to say, see, the Alabama legislature says you can't hold the home inspector liable. So I don't think this is neutral language, and I don't believe this is, you wouldn't be up here asking if it was just neutral language that really didn't do anything.
Well, I think it places home inspectors on the same footing that alarm companies are already on, that termite companies are already on, that other industries who have had cases come before the Alabama Supreme Court and be litigated have had those issues decided. The peculiar issue to home inspectors is that there was this insurance requirement, and there are this law from New Jersey and other places that may interpret that as a public policy disfavoring limitations of liability. I don't know that means the legislature is limiting liability. They're saying that that's going to get decided down the street. Now, in point of fact, they're doing 2 to 4 hour walk around home inspections for $350. To me, that's like getting somebody to look at your car. I mean, I understand it's not a car, but you know, if we want this industry to exist such as it is, and much better than not having this industry, then we're going to have these people in an ability to be licensed. And in order to be licensed, they have to have insurance. And what we're hearing from the insurance industry is that 38% of home inspectors are going to have a claim.
Well, I'm glad you said let's look at the car, because the car is interesting, an interesting aspect. If you pay someone $350 to look around your car for 2 to 4 hours, and they go through and the brakes are cut, and that person missed it, that the brakes were cut, you were saying that, well, there's no liability for the person missing the brakes are cut because we don't want to have that insurance liability. So then what purpose does the home inspector do other than just take the $350 person from the taxpayer, from the homeowner, from the person to come through? I mean, you're just taking money from them without offering anything.
Well, I think that we're offering a 2 to 4 hour inspection, a report, a good faith opinion under the ethics applicable to the home inspection industry, that they have made a good faith inspection and provided a report as to all of their observations.
But what if they're wrong?
Well, for one thing, we can get into the real weeds and say, I think there's some law out there.
Welcome to the Judiciary Committee. We get into the weeds.
Well, I think there's some law out there where the Alabama Supreme Court might question whether limitations of liability are applicable, for instance, against wantonness or willful conduct. So that's one question.
But the language you have, the legislature does not intend for the inclusion of foregoing requirement to express public policy disfavoring contractual limitations. So the legislature is stepping into this issue. It's not us just completely being neutral and ignoring it. This is us specifically saying we don't have an intention here.
Well, I think, I don't know that when the law was passed, the legislature had that intention. I can't say whether it did or it didn't, but this is, I mean, the legislature required insurance, all right? You know, presumably it did so because of some of these concerns, but I don't know that when the legislature passed an insurance requirement, it was thinking, and by the way, we want to take away customers and home inspectors' ability to negotiate in good faith to apportion risk, you know, in connection with what the service is, a $350 inspection, not a $5,000 engineers. You know, I think it's very interesting because actually I was looking earlier and the realtors had this exact same issue back in the 90s. They were having too many claims and they had a group insurer named St. Paul, I think, Marine Insurance, and they couldn't get them to renew it because they just had too many claims. And this legislature actually, I think back in 2004, 2005, just removed the insurance requirement altogether. We're asking for something far more modest than that. We are not asking to remove the insurance requirement. We're just asking for the right, like I think any two citizens should have, to negotiate something that apportions risk appropriate to the situation.
When the constituents of Baldwin County reach out to me because a home inspector did not do what they were supposed to do, and that messed up, and there's no opportunity for them to have recourse to gain anything, they're going to blame the legislature and say, no, look what you guys said. Look what you guys did. You guys took it out from the home inspector. The legislature is the one that did this. So I don't agree with, well, that's just the same thing as the insurance companies. I think this is a potential to really, really do some significant harm.
Okay, let's go. Mr. Wadsworth.
Just had a question. Is there a difference between limitations of liability and limitations of your scope of work? Yes, sir. You know, and we do limit our scope of work in accordance with what the this body, the legislature, required. It was the Real Estate Commission back then to set forth in the administrative code a particular scope of work, and so we follow that with rare exception. We actually, the Alabama Home Inspectors Organization has come out against home inspectors further limiting their scope of work beyond what is set out by the Department of Finance. Home inspectors have to they can limit their work in accordance with whatever the statute says, correct? Yeah, yes, sir. And does the New Jersey case say that limitations of the scope of the work is a limitation of liability, or how do they address that issue?
Sir, I'd have to go back and look at whether, I don't believe scope of work was an issue in that case. I believe it was directly a home inspection contract that limited the recovery to either the cost of the inspection or maybe double or triple cost of the inspection. And the question was whether that was a valid enforceable.
And does Alabama allow a limitation of scope of work?
As far as I know, sir, Alabama, well, I don't know, because the administrative code says what it says in terms of what home inspectors are required to do currently. The Alabama Home Inspector Organization and Department of Finance have come out publicly and said that we don't think that you can limit your scope except in really weird circumstances.
But they don't allow limitation of liability, but they do allow limitations of your scope of work. Would that not be correct?
Alabama Supreme Court generally has upheld limitations of liability. I don't know that the question of whether limitation of scope has come before the courts. I think the Department of Finance has said that the home inspectors are not, except in very unusual circumstances, allowed to limit their scope beyond what is set forth in their standards of practice.
Thank you.
Mr. Robbins, you had a question?
I did. Thank you. So I just had a quick question from what we were discussing earlier. If you read, so currently the way it reads, and it'll say that way, is that there is insurance against the errors and omissions of a home inspector in an amount and form to be prescribed by the building commission. So if within the scope of work of a home inspector, if that home inspector just didn't check to see if the outlets were grounded and someone got electrocuted, because that is standard for any home inspector to do, that would be an error and omission, which you would still have the insurance to fall back on, correct?
Yeah, so long as they're able to procure that insurance, it would potentially be there. And I would think they would also be subject to potential discipline with the commission if it was an error that clearly should have been caught.
So does the building commission set the standard inspection of what is a standard inspection?
It's through the administrative code. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Mr. England, go ahead.
So under this legislation, if you had an issue with a home inspector, what would be your recourse?
Well, I think number one, obviously these limitations of liability do provide some measure of relief, typically 2 or 3 times what you paid. Now, I understand that can be not enough, but and then second would be to file a complaint with the Department of Finance, saying that the inspector didn't meet their duties under the law. There is a disciplinary process over there, and a person could be disciplined.
What creates the standard? Like, is there a standard of care? Is there, what would be negligence or whatever in regards to home inspecting? And that may be a terrible question, but.
Are you saying from a professional standpoint or a legal standpoint?
Well, both, because I want to know, because anytime somebody's asking for some sort of immunity or whatever you want to call it, you have to balance the need of whatever service is provided versus the jeopardy is attached if you do a horrible job. So we need to figure out where that comfortable medium is between those two, because obviously we don't want to discourage home inspectors, but we also know that there are some that don't do a very good job, so we don't want to eliminate recourse either. And what Representative Simpson was saying kind of resonates with me, because you don't really have much of an opportunity in those situations without the threat of a lawsuit to hold someone accountable. So, so that's what I ask about the standard. Like, in the contract with the home inspector, is that what you negotiate in there? Like, what are you supposed to be looking for and all that kind of stuff?
So the contracts typically say that we will perform a home inspection in accordance with the administrative code, with the standards. I would say that the administrative code, in setting forth a fairly specific list of what has to be inspected and reported upon, likely sets the legal standard of care too, though I'm sure lots of attorneys could come up with arguments for why that's not the case. So, that is the standard of care. I think what this comes down to is correctly apportioning risk and liability. And if we want consumers to have available to them a $300 3-hour walk-around inspection, what we're hearing from the home inspector industry the home inspectors as well as their insurers is that we're not going to be able to have unlimited liability. And I'm an insurance defense attorney, and I'll tell you, I mean, I know how insurance companies act. They are rational actors. So you get a claim. It may be frivolous. You get a claim, but the cost of defense is higher than the claim or the risk of going to trial or whatever. And so these claims come in and they're settled, and that creates cost to the insurance company. It dissuades insurance companies from writing the coverage, and ultimately can lead to the uninsurability of the inspectors. Anecdotally, I think a lot of our older, better inspectors are tired of getting these claims against them and are retiring.
But it sounds like you're saying $300 work creates $300 worth of expectations.
I'm saying that I don't think that we can be a warrantor of your home, and because of the realities.
Warranty is way down there. We're not even at warranty. We're just talking about
Yes, sir.
You're just basically saying that you shouldn't have very much expectation of our quality of work if you're only paying us $300.
I think you should have an expectation that our work will be in accordance with the home inspector's regulations, the administrative code, their obligations to act ethically. They have an ethical code, that they're going to do the best job that they can to protect the consumer. But there's a limitation in a home inspection into what they can do. And then there's the other side of it, which is we get complaints that are well outside of the scope, but they're nonetheless settled or incentivized to continue because the insurance companies settle them.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cox, but the fact that an insurance company makes a business decision to settle a lawsuit, that perhaps the business decision to try that lawsuit and dissuade others from doing the same is just that. It's just a business decision. If I'm not mistaken, some of our medical malpractice carriers have made the decision they will not pay claims. You will try your case. And they do that for the sole purpose of dissuading people from suing them, do they not?
Yeah, I believe you're probably referring to ProAssurance, and it's been a brilliant strategy. But with complete respect, Mr. Chairman, 319 home inspectors, I believe Stan Starnes went and ran that insurance company.
Oh, I do too. But...
And put in that strategy. But I'm talking to Jim Hill at Inspector Pro, who's got 200 licensees, and I don't believe that industry has the strength of the will. They're going to pull out the way Great American did. They're going to pull out the way Inspector Pro did out of New Jersey.
Is there a statute of limitations on? In other words, if they miss something, is there a statute of limitations with when this claim must be brought?
6 years.
6 years, because it's contract.
Because it's a contract, or warranty, one of the two.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Cox? He is I think, been very admirable in his presentation. Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Walker, you are opposed to this, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Jeremy Walker, Chief Executive Officer of the Alabama Association of Realtors. I speak to you today on behalf of our organization and on behalf of the Home Builders Association of Alabama, who also stand opposed to this bill. Their lobbyists could not attend due to a conflict with another committee meeting. A comment that was made in the prior speaker, some of this feels sort of personal, and realtors keep getting thrown up a little bit in this, and that it may be driven by the administration. I want to convey to the committee, we have heard problems about inspector issues from our members, grassroots, for the 9 years I've been employed there. This is not a new issue. Secondly, there is no profession that is perfect, ours especially. We have real estate agents that don't do what they're supposed to do. I wish they all did. There are home builders who don't do what they're supposed to do. I wish all of them did, and doctors and lawyers and everyone else. Everyone falls short. But I would like to reframe this, that it's not about home inspectors per se, and not about realtors per se, or home builders. This is about the homeowner. And does the homeowner have a reasonable recourse and opportunity to hold a professional liable as part of a real estate transaction for negligence that may arise during part of that. And for those reasons, we believe that this bill further insulates this industry and puts that out of reach for a homeowner. We certainly do not want home inspectors to go out of business. We value what they bring to a transaction. They are there on behalf of a buyer to inspect a property, to crawl under the house, to get in the attic, to discover defects that a layman, a consumer, is not going to discover. That inspector is their last line of defense. It is their agent to get in there and do that. They count on them for that. A little bit beyond this bill, you know, if a homeowner is aggrieved, there are typically one of two processes they can take. One is regulatory, through a professional licensing board. The other is through a civil course of action. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the civil. One other frustration with this for consumers is there really is not a licensure board, in our opinion, that is truly holding these licensees accountable. The Building Commission has had this entity licensing inspectors for the last 17 years. Based on records that we have not been able to obtain, there have been almost no penalties imposed on an inspector over the last 17 years. To put that in perspective, we have about 100,000 residential real estate transactions in the state of Alabama per year. So in the last 17 years, that's about 1.7. And in 1.7 million transactions, there hasn't been one inspector that's been fined by the board. We think we're very worried about the accountability here. We don't want to hurt anyone. We certainly want to protect the right to contract. That is something our industry stands for. We certainly stand against frivolous lawsuits. We hear that loud and clear. But we do feel like this bill goes too far in that. And if warranties need to be addressed regarding appliances, refrigerators, I mean, that's certainly something very difficult, and we would love to work on that. But if a microwave goes out, I think that's very hard for an inspector to find that information. But the other structures with the house, we just want to be sure that a homeowner has that recourse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right. Any questions for Mr. Walker? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Appreciate it. Is there someone else that would like to speak in as a proponent? Come on up, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Doug Johnson. I'm from Mobile, and I am a home inspector with 10 years of experience. I know a lot of us are busy today. I'm one of the non-paid people that's in the room, actually losing business, being a small business owner. When I'm not working, I'm not getting paid. So many of my colleagues here are from across the state, giving up our time to help work for our industry. I know a lot of you guys have more important things to think about and talk about, you know, the failing schools in the state, failing roads, failing prisons. So I appreciate your time looking at this issue. This bill is about allowing two consenting persons, two adults consenting to internegotiate on each other about this. We're a voluntary part of the home buying process. There's no law currently requiring a home buyer to have a home inspection. And there's no law requiring a homeowner to disclose any known faults in that house to a potential buyer. So the homeowner can easily be like a used car salesman and even lie about because it is a buyer beware state. We find regularly safety issues in homes like bad smoke alarms that would otherwise help people get out of a house in the event of a fire, faulty wiring, unsafe pools, and much more. And we go in there with the mind of making sure that that deck wouldn't collapse and wouldn't fall down. But we are highly limited. We can only see what we can see. We can only touch what we can touch. You know, we might be able to see that there's a water stain in the ceiling, but we're not allowed to poke a hole through it. We're not allowed to damage that structure to understand what the extent of that damage is. So we have to use limitations in our scope because we can only comment on what we can actually see and defend. This bill will help to reduce my biggest expense as a business owner, and that's my insurance. I think we've all talked about the insurance with the previous speakers, and it's a big expense for us. That's all I have.
Questions, Mr. Jones? Just real quick, sir.
In your contracts, are there arbitration agreements in them?
We have the option to, yes.
But they're not, I mean, they're not a part of your normal course of business. When you do it, do you put arbitration agreements in your contracts?
I don't like arbitration, honestly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I think that's it. So, sure, come on down. I think we got enough time for one more.
I'm not a public speaker, so I'm just going to read a few notes here.
Before you do, sir, tell us your name.
I'm Andrew Griffith. I'm a home inspector from Birmingham. I've been in this business for about 30 years. Heard a lot of conversation here today, a lot of legal conversation. I'm just a home inspector. I am with AHIO, the Alabama Home Inspector Organization. I'm one of the directors with it, so I know a little bit about the conversations we've been having. Just to tell you I heard the word grassroots earlier. By the way, the home inspectors, I've been at this for 30 years. He said 9. We've gotten 30 years of complaints on realtors, so it kind of swings both ways like it does everywhere. I share a couple of war stories to know where this is coming from. I think everybody is now talking about the stuff in the stratosphere, but one of my favorites is recently I got a call from a client, answered the phone and says, Andrew, I need your, I'd done a home inspection about a year earlier for this one guy. He said, Andrew, I need your insurance name and number. Oh my goodness, why? What happened? What's wrong with the home inspection? Oh, nothing. You did a great home inspection, but the dam that the road crosses coming into my subdivision is failing and it's HOA, and I need your insurance company to pay for it. So this is the kind of call we get. Are we trying to dodge the liability and responsibility? No, but you can't be a home inspector in Alabama because we didn't put any limits of liability on this insurance we attached. And a lot of states have. Georgia's 1 year of liability for a home inspector. Alabama, we said 6, but actually that lawyer tells me that I got 7 years of discoverability up to that amount. So, yeah, there may be some bad actors out there, but you can't get the good ones at the same time. We've got this big hand. We're trying to scoop up all the bad actors by having this blanket insurance policy, but you're putting good inspectors out of business. Fact. Great inspectors. A lot of them are getting up in age, but these are the guys we want. The guys who are fed up are the ones who are doing a lot, have a lot of experience, or the guys who have accrued a lot of knowledge on it. And these are the guys who are getting out of it. My own son. We're losing that guy because of this very kind of problem out there. And I had trained him to do this industry. He's probably one of the most accomplished in the state. But yes, they've become, Mr. Simpson, they've become synonymous with home warranty. We get calls regularly for people who we've done home inspections for who want us to cover things that have nothing to do with the home inspection. One of my favorites is the concealed, the lawyers that represent us a lot of times call concealed cases. It's behind a door. Here's a real case, cracks under vinyl. Couldn't have seen, it's a case. A case where the vanity covered damage behind the wall, real case. Insurance settled that, insurance settled the other one. A case, my favorite because it was me, case under the kitchen cabinet. No way in the laws of physics could you have seen this, but I got sued for it and the insurance settled. These are real tales here. Now, I'm not a bad actor. I've been doing it for 30 years. Got customers going back 26 years come to me and say, let's do some more of these. I mean, I have a good relationship with these customers. Have done roughly 20,000 of them. But the industry can't be sustained if we're going forward without taking some measure to alleviate the rampant. The lawyers call it, to me, the defense lawyers out there in Birmingham are telling me it's a cottage industry in the legal trade. Plaintiff lawyers and defense lawyers set up for this big insurance target that's on these home inspectors. And somebody said earlier, we're mom and pop. All these guys out here, they're 1, 2, 3 men maybe, not big operations. We're small business in Alabama trying to survive. And if this is an industry that's necessary, and yeah, there may be some bad experiences the real estate representative can tell us, But there's been hundreds of thousands of cases, if not millions, where these guys have saved lives, they've gone out and customers saved money, they've educated them on things. And yeah, there may be some instances where we've got somebody that doesn't do the job that they should do. I'm sure there is in every industry. We're not saying give those guys a free ride. If we were, we'd have come to you and said, hey, we don't want any liability, or we only want a year like Georgia, or we don't want to have insurance requirement, which is really probably the answer here, but we don't think it's reasonable for everybody to come to that. So we went to a team of lawyers and said, what's the reasonable thing to do here? We aren't starting way up there asking for no insurance and no responsibility. We said, okay, well, what if we are able to negotiate with our clients? And so they came up with some contracts. One of them, for example, says, you have the choice as a client to limit our liability to 2, 3, 4 times your price of your inspection. If it's $400, it might be $1,200 or $1,500 or $2,000 is one option, or you can have unlimited liability, and it would be $3,000 because we would have to go buy an engineer to come here, an HVAC technician to come here, a plumber to come here, an electrical to come here, everybody to look at what's code and what's performance on that house. And for a reasonable amount of fee for $3,000 or $4,000, we could sell you unlimited liability. So we're trying to give our customers the option. Now, this is the same option the lawyer said a bunch of other industries already have. We're not asking for something we don't already have. We just want a clear picture of it. We want to survive as a small business inspection business, not as a home warranty. For $350, guys and gals, we cannot warranty all these houses. I'm just sorry, Mr. Simpson, it's not going to happen. For $350, you can't carry.
All right.
You can't carry it.
That's twice. I was going to ignore it, but he's called me out twice. Nobody is asking for a warranty. Y'all are saying, look over there, look over there, look over there. Nothing in this bill talks about a warranty. You're talking about limited liability. That's a whole different ballgame than talking about warranty.
We're being used as that.
That's a whole other ballgame than the bill that you have presented.
Well, we're being used to that even though it's a different ballgame. I'm getting these calls, just like I tell you, that's a true story. I didn't make that up.
Mr. Griffith, nobody's saying you made it up.
Thank y'all for letting me speak.
Hang on. Are there any questions for this gentleman? There is no warranty in this bill, is there?
No, sir.
I didn't think. I read it. I hadn't got it memorized, but I don't remember anything about a warranty.
No, but we're being asked to warranty the homes instead of not having any liability going forward. And
okay.
Thank y'all.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. That's going to close out this public hearing. We now have another one. House Bill 229, Mr. England.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the recognition. Before I get started, let me assure you there are no home inspectors or warranties in this bill. But what this bill does do is give individuals who've earned them second chances. Our habitual offender law for years has been one of the most punitive in the country. For years, Alabama was the easiest place in the country to end up with life without parole. And as a result of that law, we have a growing population in our Department of Corrections, in prison, that aren't there necessarily for what they were convicted of, but basically when they were convicted. Over the course of the years, we've created additional felonies. We've made them violent felonies. We've taken them out. We've also created Class D felonies. We've taken out whatever charge that's not going to be calculated in habitual offender anymore. But the people who would have benefited from those changes were never offered any relief. Basic fundamental fairness. in that process, there are individuals who have matriculated through the system that have committed worse atrocities or tragedies or tragic events, much more serious than some people who are ended up serving life without parole. So what this bill attempts to do is identify a population within our prison system that whose facts of their case have no harm to anyone and are non-sexual offenses. And it's not an automatic release, it's a review. And they go back before the judge that sentenced them, or in the same circuit where someone serving life without parole gets an opportunity for review. That's it. Nothing complicated. And you know, I know all you guys and girls think all my bills are extremely reasonable, but this is extremely reasonable. And you've heard me talk about the pardons and parole and our prison system for years, and I'm pretty sure you're tired of hearing me talk about it, but I'm not going to stop. Because I think you're going to be able today to hear from people who are going to give life to this discussion and help us understand that there are people within our prison system that are redeemable and deserve an opportunity to become contributing, working Alabamians again. And if that doesn't work for you, I can also talk to you about how much it's going to cost us. Because our aging population in prison, that population grows in expense. And I don't have to remind you guys, we are currently building a $1 billion prison. Probably going to cost more than that by the time we start building it, actually building it. And we're spending $1 billion on health care. And primarily, that's on an aging population that we really can't afford to take care of. So I'm going to take a step back because my contribution to this conversation isn't nearly as valuable as the people who have benefited or gotten the opportunity to be released through a review of some sort. So I'm going to get out of the way and allow those folks to speak.
Yes, sir, Mr. Fodder.
Chris, I want to ask you a question real quick before you turn it over to the folks speaking on it. Your bill is only affecting non-violent offenders. Is that right?
Well, it would be, in a sense, yes. This is going to be a identified group of individuals that I think at this point, with the numbers that are in here now, that maybe 250 or so, if I'm not mistaken, not very many, whose triggering offense for the life without parole or whatever offense did not involve hurting anyone.
Yeah, and that's what I want. That was the thing I wanted to get clarity on with you is it, because I think when I was talking with some people about the bill, I asked about, well, what happens if there's a robbery? In other words, I hold you up at gunpoint, but I don't hurt you. I don't shoot you. I don't hit you, but I hold you up at gunpoint and rob you. And I think, do I understand that type of, that would be included in your bill?
Right.
So the basis of in your bill, the nonviolent is someone, you didn't injure your victim physically. I mean, the
right.
mental trauma, being held up at gunpoint or like that, or a knife or whatever, but your bill is aimed at people who could have mentally traumatized and injured people, just not physically.
Right, and again, I'm glad you brought that up because I want to clarify. I want to clarify that. I don't think anybody's trying to devalue the experience of a victim, because honestly, it's one of the most important components of our system is the fact that we hear from victims and prosecutors, and this bill affords, when they come up for review, affords the victim the opportunity to be heard, and also the district attorney to be heard as well. And what we're finding here is that when victims are approached in cases like these, and also district attorneys in cases like these, they're often surprised that the individual is still incarcerated. So this is not one of those efforts that, you know, we're going to walk down to any building and open a door and just let people out. This is to create an opportunity to review those cases after someone has been incarcerated who fits this particular fact situation, and this gives them an opportunity for review. And again, some people, as you mentioned, there are people who have robbed individuals, hurt them, harmed them, right? And have gone in and out of the system, while somebody who may be less culpable in the sense that they didn't hurt anybody can't ever get out, can't even get a review.
And you're trying to get to those people.
Yeah.
And look, you know, I respect your opinions.
Every time I hear that, I know something bad's coming.
No. I think you've had a lot more study of the criminal system, and I do respect your opinions greatly, and I'm going to look forward to listening to everybody but that speaks today about it. But I did just want to,
Yep.
I know what you're trying to do. I also, you know, I'm wondering if there was some, maybe there perhaps could be some workable ground, but to, you know, for those victims that have been maybe not physically injured, but were, you know, but I look forward to hearing the speakers, and I do appreciate you sharing that with me.
No, your assessment is fair, and to that end, we've probably wanted to make sure that the bill requires, that gives the victim an opportunity to be involved, to speak, and also the prosecutor. We are, again, this is a reasonable, measured approach to identifying a prison population that could potentially be better served outside of our prison system to create space for somebody that may actually need to be there.
Okay, Mr. Robbins, you had a question. I'm going to let y'all, obviously on this committee, you can ask Mr. England, but I want you to understand we're not going to vote today. We're going to have him back up here next week, and we're going to let you ask him at that point. Not that I'm precluding you from doing it today, Mr. Robbins or Mr. Faulkner, but go ahead.
Well, next week, Matt can be mean to me. So.
And he will.
I've already had my one.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Robbins.
I guess this really isn't there's a question, more of a clarification. I hope you can help me understand. So, and it'll probably help me when I hear the speakers coming up. So, on page, let's see, line 88, it says a conviction for a nonviolent offense as defined in section 122532. And so I don't practice in criminal law, so I don't want to wade into something and then you be like, well, obviously you should know that. So, like David Faulkner does on every occasion, just wades into something and. So
he gets paid by the word.
So it says that nonviolent offense in 122532 is just simply all offenses which are not violent offenses. So, and then it defines the violent offenses further down. So I guess by that definition of violent offenses, it's just simply everything that is not, is just simply everything that is not described as a violent offense is therefore nonviolent, or is there some other definition somewhere
No, I think
that defines?
Yeah, and to that end, yes, and that's how we're trying to define to get to a specific population. So we're not, going after someone that, again, pulling out someone that harmed someone or was involved in some sort of sexual offense.
All right, Mr. England, you've got, I think we got about 4 or 5 people who want to speak as proponents and no opposition, which is fine. However, let's hold the proponents to about 3, since we have no one in opposition. So if you're a proponent, certainly let 3 of you come up and speak. Mr. England, you may know them better than I do. You can pick.
I think, to be honest with you, I think everybody that's sitting in this section probably need to give them about 5 minutes each.
No, sir.
Oh, all right. But
thank you, though, Mr. England.
But I think
I will certainly tell you what we'll do. Whoever speaks, we will take it that the other one would echo that or a very similar belief.
But I do want to say though, before some of the individuals that have signed up have survived some of the worst humanitarian situations that we've seen, that our Department of Justice identified, that the federal courts have identified. So I would want those individuals to have an opportunity to speak if they signed up.
Well, I've got 5 people here then. It looks like
Ronald McKeithen?
Mr. McKeithen?
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. McKeithen, please. And Mr. McKeithen, I'm not trying to in any way discount what you're about to tell us, but I really would, I'm going to ask you to be succinct.
Okay.
Is that fair?
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Ronald McKeithen. I'm here to support the bill. At age 20, I was convicted of first-degree robbery for robbing a convenience store and sentenced to life without parole under the Habitual Offenders Act. I served 37 years. When I went to prison, I was familiar with prison. I'd been there before. Did 8 months, went to work release. But this was different. I was given a death sentence. And so when I got there, I realized that I needed to find purpose. And so I immersed myself in education. The first thing I got was my GED, and that was like 2 weeks before I was even convicted. And after I was convicted, I got a certificate in commercial foods, barbering, and then I just started taking every class I could, get my foot in. I taught GED classes. I was working in the GED program in 2 different prisons. And when I finally got the position of department head in the library in Audendome, I was able to create my own classes. I had a friend that found a book on debate and brought to me. And I said, well, hey, we ain't got nothing else to do, let's do that. And the debate class got so great that even the prison added to that curriculum. Because I kind of got good at drawing, I had beginner art classes. I had an advanced art class. When my lawyers reached my victims in my case, they were shocked that I was still locked up. I mean, really shocked. They couldn't wait to fill out affidavits. And I wouldn't have been released unless they had gotten, the main reason I was released, because they had contacted the DA, and the DA reviewed my case, and he didn't oppose. But if he had opposed, I would still be in prison right now waiting to die. I was released December the 16th, 2020. I've been out a little over 2 years. I've done so much to give back to the community. Because of the art I was doing, I've been in like 3 or 4 art exhibits. One was a solo art exhibit. I've shared my story of redemption at the University of Alabama, Sanford, Cumberland, UAB. I've even assisted in some UAB classes. I've even taught art to what we call at-risk kids. And I also was named the person to watch in 2023 by the Montgomery Advertiser, and that didn't even impress me. But, and then I hung around Alabama Appleseed so much that they decided to hire me as their reentry coordinator. And one of the highlights of my job is when I get the opportunity to go back to the prison and meet these guys. And when they walk out the gate and be able to hug them and tell them, hey, we got you. You got all the support you need. And the main purpose of my life has been is helping these guys reentry run smoothly. Because when you don't have to get out of prison, don't have support, you don't know where to get IDs. You don't know how to get medical care. You don't know any of these things. And we make sure we do this. And it's not us saying this, but other people are saying that we're doing groundbreaking work because we care about our clients. We have a 100% success rate. But regardless of what all I've done, people I've talked to, all of this, regardless of all that, I can't help but think about the guys I left behind, the guys that are in dorms, that are creating classes, because I left prison with over 200 certificates. That surprised me because I wasn't keeping count. I was just going to classes because classes became my sanctuary. I loved the class. I loved learning. It kept my mind off my misery. It kept me from going crazy. But like I said, I can't beat these guys because it's not a week or two go by, I don't see a friend or someone I know that has died, overdose, suicide, murder. And I'm worried for them. And this is why we need to pass this bill. And the last thing I want to remind you or say that I was supposed to die in prison because of the prison law. And when I think about all I've done since I've been out, all I've given back, I really believe that would have been a waste. And the main reason I'm here is to try to convince you, to show you that this is possible. This is very much possible. I have guys here that I brought with me that are living wonderful lives, getting their own places. One of our clients has started a truck business. It's like I enjoy helping these guys. And we need some help because it's hard. We need some help. And this is why I'm here supporting this bill, because to me, this bill is about saving lives. Because the bodies are packing up. I mean, people are dying in there. My friends are dying. And there are guys that have earned the right for a second chance, just like I earned it. And I assure you, if you was to let these guys out or allow them opportunity, they will prove to you that they can be just as productive as I am. And I promise you, I will help them. Every day I'm with these guys, helping them do things. And they are happy. Thank you for allowing me to.
Oh, Mr. McKinney, thank you. Any questions for this gentleman? Yes, sir, Mr. Partner.
Yes, sir. I'm really glad to hear what you're doing and what you're doing now and giving back. And you said you were convicted of robbing a convenience store.
Yes.
And served. Did anybody get injured?
No.
And I mean physically?
No. They might have caught a cold because I asked them to step in the cooler. And
what?
They might have caught a cold. The only thing I asked them to step in the cooler and left. So that's the only injury I think that, other than the mental anguish of just being scared and afraid, no one was touched.
And that was the only crime you committed, and you served 37 years for that?
No, the Habitual Offenders Act. That means I had to have 3 priors. I had 2 credit card cases, one because I had them and because I used them. So 2 cases out the same credit cards, and I had a burglary. But my life turned when I got involved with drugs because I was living a very pressured life. My mother was alcoholic. She stabbed me twice when I was trying to stop her from going drinking. I was the oldest adult. I had to make sure my siblings were okay. But the pressure got so great to me that, well, I couldn't deal with it. I didn't have nobody to talk, so I got on drugs. And my life just went crazy.
Well, look, I'm just trying to for this bill to understand what your sentence was and for what reason. Mm-hmm. And I think you've answered. I think it was 2 credit card fraud cases.
Possession of stolen credit cards.
Okay.
And fraudulent use of stolen credit cards.
Okay.
The same cards.
And then
just split it into maybe 2 priors.
And then a burglary.
Mm-hmm. When me and some youth, we were just really just drunk, just crazy, doing stuff, and got charged with burglary.
And then with the convenience store.
Convenience store. And that's when I was on drugs.
And that put you in for you ended up serving 37 years.
37 years.
But you were in for life?
Life without parole. I would still be there if it wasn't for Alabama Appleseed and the DA reviewing my case and realizing that I shouldn't be there. And it's not just them. I met so many people from UAB, Auburn. People kept noticing me, and they kept like, man, you don't need to be in here. Because I was always there trying to learn, and they always saw me trying to teach other people. My motto was that I didn't have the luxury of being unproductive. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Hang on, Mr. Backus. Hang on. All right, thank you, Mr. McKeithen. Thank you a lot. Who's next, Mr. England? Mr. Backus, you want Mr. Backus to speak?
He's chomping at the bit.
Yes, sir, I think he is too.
The Board of Trustees of the Alabama system is having an honorary party for Senator Shelby. And I'm asked to speak at 6 o'clock, so that's why I keep hopping up.
Okay, go ahead, Mr.
And I
Backus.
definitely want to go, David, because I won't have to give a contribution. And if you know Shelby, if he asks you for something, you have to bring a check. So this is the first time that I'll be around him where, he doesn't ask me for a check. But a Holocaust survivor wrote that God made, and I'm going to make sure, God made man because he loves stories. The Bible is a book of stories. Ron McEachin just gave his story. And there are all kind of stories like that. There's one story that I'm a part of. This is my story. In 2015, I was chair of the subcommittee in Judiciary in charge of prisons and crime. And I was asked to visit the Alabama prison system. And when I went to St. Clair, the warden asked me if he could speak to me after the tour. Well, if anybody that I would have wanted to talk to at that institution, it would have been the warden, because no one else knows more about what's going on than what the Bible might call a jailer. And he has a lot of responsibility. It's probably, I think it's one of the toughest jobs there is. And so when I completed the tour, I came to his office, and I'll still remember what he said. I hear it in my mind all the time. He said, "There's a man here that doesn't need to be here, and I want you to talk to him." I thought, this is kind of strange. Maybe he's innocent. Maybe it's some innocent guy. Well, I talked to him, and I asked him what he did, and he told me what he did, and he wasn't innocent. He was guilty. He had had 3 thefts, and he had 2 burglaries. And he was 19 and 20, and then when he had the last one, he was 24. And during the last one, he made a horrible mistake. He stole a gun. And when the homeowner came home, he hid in the closet. And the homeowner called the police, and they arrested him. And they found that he had gathered this gun over here. So he told me, I've been in here since he was 24, and he was 50, about 50 then. He'd been there 26 years, maybe longer. And I told him I wanted to check this out. Because I don't, anybody that has dealt with prisoners knows that you're going to hear a lot. Most of them say they're innocent. Well, he didn't. I mean, he said, "Look, I was desperate." I checked on him. His father was wounded at Omaha Beach, and then he was totally disabled during the Battle of the Bulge when he walked 80 miles. There's a Montgomery Advertiser article, highly decorated. And he was home confined to a wheelchair. And the warden also said, it breaks my heart because every 2 weeks his mother and dad come up and visit him. And he said it never fails that his mother cries and his dad in his wheelchair, and I see that every 2 weeks. I checked on his record. He's in an honor dorm. He had actually been permitted to go to Gadsden State and take courses. The parole board has since changed that. I don't know if Representative Chestnut, they've tightened all those requirements for people life without parole. You can't even be in an honor dorm anymore with life without parole. You can't qualify for any of those. So he got 2 degrees from Samford University. I talked to his professor there, and he said, I wanted to take my class up there and have them talk to this man. He'd taken seminary courses. I talked to 2 guys that had gotten out of prison that he said told me they would help me. One of them was in there for murder, and he'd gotten out after 15 years. And the guy, he committed murder. But you know what he was doing? He said, I'd be willing to hire a lawyer to help him because he's one of the best people I've ever met. The longer I checked on this, the more amazed I was. I tried to kind of forget it. And then a guy at Church of the Highlands, who was in charge of their prison ministry at the time, or one of them, called me and said, would you, he said, do you know about this guy, John Manley? And he said, there's 2 guys. He told me 2 different guys. And I said, yeah. I do. And I've talked, I think, Jim, I went and talked to you. I don't know if you remember, we talked on the phone about 3 years ago, and you said, there's a bill that's going to help these people. I don't know if do you recall that conversation? Yeah, so we had a conversation. I talked to, at that time, Mike Hill. And Mike Hill said, you know, I'll help you on it. He was representing Shelby County like you are, I think, Russell, you represent Shelby County. Mike said, this is terrible. I can't believe this. I then checked on something, and it totally amazed me. 5 years after he pled guilty to life without parole, the legislature changed the law and made it a 10-year maximum. The 10-year was the maximum sentence. He was convicted of life without parole because he stole a gun. Alabama was one of 2 states at that time that considered stealing a gun as armed burglary. 2 states. Had he been in 48 states, including Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida, he would not have been convicted. He'd got 10 years. Life without parole versus 10 years. I called my cousin. We went to school from the 1st grade to the 8th grade. He was the district attorney and now is serving as supernumerary judge in a real rough town in Texas, Waco, Texas. Doesn't get any rougher. And I was talking to him about it. We took a vacation together. He told me that the maximum you could have gotten at that time and now is 15 years in Texas, which is considered, you know, a rough territory, a real rough territory. He said, what about the parole board? You know, what about the governor? Don Siegelman changed the law to where the governor cannot commute a sentence on life without parole. Unlike a lot of states. In Texas, I could have gone to the governor. I talked to Bob Riley. He said, you know, I don't have an ability to do it. I wish I did. How about the parole board? No, they can't do anything about it. So that's my story. And let me tell you something. I live with this all the time. I really do. I feel guilty when I don't get up and try to call somebody and talk to them about this. I think about this. I mean, I wish I had never heard this in many cases. And in many cases, y'all will probably hope that this never comes before you, that you never have to take a vote. Because you could take a vote and one of these people could get out and they could commit another crime. And you could say, well, you know, that's a risk. We take a risk every day. You weren't elected not to take a risk, but you were elected to dispense justice and to do the right thing. And this guy is 60 years old. He's been in jail for 36 years. And he never hurt a person. But I'm going to close by this. 2 things. I got a call from the victim. The victim said, I understand you're trying to help John Manley. I thought, oh, yeah. I said, yes, I am. He said, is there anything I can do? I said, excuse me? He said, I can't believe that young man's still in jail. I said, well, you can go to the DA. You know, victim. We talk about the victim. You mentioned, David, you know, the victim. What's the victim thing? He said, I would have never signed the warrant had I known this would happen. I would have never said, I said, are you willing to say that? He made a statement and signed it, and you have that statement. He said, I'm horrified. I'm horrified. I have to live with this. He said the young guy was hiding in the closet. I funded a bill for the forensic group, and Barry Matson used to represent forensics. And I went to see Barry about this, and as I left, he listened to me. He made no commitments. But as I left, he said, I want to give you something. This is our code. I stuck it in my pocket. And when I got home, I pulled it out. And do you know what it quotes? Micah. Where Micah 3:8. This is their code. This is the District Attorney Association, which may come to you and ask you to vote against this bill. I don't know. It says, Barry Matson, Executive Director, Office of Prosecutorial Services, Alabama District Attorney Association. Flip it over, and it says Micah 6:8. Walk humbly, seek justice, but love mercy. Mercy. I'm asking you for mercy. That's a part of their creed. There's that balance. And we're talking about a nonviolent person. He had a gun, or he could have shot somebody. But just like my son, who was a Marine, when he went in again, Desert Storm, he was 22. He said, Dad, I really never realized how much danger I was in. You know, he was 22 years old. He said, when I got about 30-something, I decided this isn't for me. You know, we change. We change. Most everything he did, he was 19 or 20. So I appeal to you. I appeal to you. These people, their story is of prison, and Russell, you know this. These prisons are horrible places, and I'm not excusing that. You know, a lot of bad people in these people. I visited Donaldson, and I talked to two people. Within 5 years, they were both dead. One was killed by another prisoner, and one they found dead in his cell. He's gone through 32 years of 34 years or whatever of hell. It's time to give him a chance. His mother's still alive. His dad died 6 months ago. I prayed he'd get to see his dad and care for him. He didn't. His mother is still here. She owns her house. He has 3 jobs promised to him, and he will live at home. Thank you.
Mr. Backus, thank you. Appreciate it. Drive carefully going to Tuscaloosa. Who you got, Mr. England? I don't think so, Mr. Backus. We appreciate your time and your input. Thank you so very much, and we appreciate all you've done for the state of Alabama over these years.
This is not about Republicans or Democrats or blacks or whites. This is about justice and mercy.
Thanks, Mr. Backus. Appreciate you very, very, very much. Yes, sir. Please state your name for us, will you?
My name is Robert Reed, and I'm a free world person like you guys, and I live in Irondale, Alabama. Does anybody know where Irondale is? And,
Sure.
I moved to Alabama in 1983, and then I started my own company in 1988, which has been a tremendous blessing. But in 2016, I started going to Donaldson Prison every week through a ministry called Kairos. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with that. But through that opportunity to be there, I met one of the residents who worked in the chapel all the time, a guy named Joe Bennett. And he and I became very close friends, just being able to talk and share with each other. And I found out that he was there on life without parole, which I was surprised that his sentence was so extreme. But he asked me one time, he said, if I ever could get out of this place, would you give me a job? And having met him and known him very well, I said, Joe, I said, you can go work for me tomorrow if you can get out. I said, I would love to have you come. And so lo and behold, about 6 months later, he had an opportunity to be released. And my wife and I were actually able to go to the prison and pick him up and take him to a place where he could stay. And then he came to work for me in 2021. And he's been probably one of the best employees I've ever had. He's a supervisor for me and runs a crew of guys, and I totally trust him. And he's the kind of person that we're wanting to bring to the free world like we're talking right now. And one of the things that really struck me was when he had started working early November of 2021, we got close to Thanksgiving, and I always give a holiday for my guys, as you should. And he said, "This will be the first time in 25 years I've been able to be with my family for Thanksgiving." And that really hit me because the families are serving the sentence too. And for him to have the opportunity to be with his family again, and it was a great time. I'm so thankful that can happen, and I believe this bill can help us bring more men like Joe into that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. England? Mr. England, you got anybody else? So let's do keep it to about one more, Mr. England, because I think we got other bills that we need to deal with also, and you're going to get a chance to talk to us again in next week.
Okay. I thank y'all for giving me the opportunity to be here. My name is Robert Cheeks. I'm 80 years old, and I also was sentenced in Alabama prison with life without parole. I had a robbery case. Yes, I was guilty, and I served 38 years. I'm sorry I did it, and I was given another opportunity to redeem myself. And I just want to say it's true how oppressive prison can be to people, the drugs, the guys that committing murders, and all of that stuff. I didn't do anything like that when I was there. I kept a clear record for over 30-some years, and I worked in the kitchen. I tried to be obedient and do what I was told, and that was one of the reasons why I was able to get out of prison after serving almost 40 years. The district attorney in Jefferson County reviewed my case, and they figured I would be, you know, a likely person to be released, and I were, and I'm thankful for that. I was released on the 22nd of July last year, and I've been doing good since I've been out, but I've got a disability. I had cancer in 2020, but I'm in remission now, and I would appreciate if y'all would think kindly of that bill and help some of them other guys, because you got a lot of guys in prison in Alabama that's real old. I know one guy in prison there at Donaldson is over 100 years old, and those people need some kind of redemption like I were given. I wish I could work. I'm not able to work now. I'm totally disabled, and I'm just thankful to be out, and I appreciate it if y'all would think kindly of that bill and give some justice to it, because people sometimes need a second chance. Everybody in prison is not, you know, they might be guilty, but there can be a chance for them to be redeemed, you know. A lot of people in prison can be redeemed and given a second chance like I was. So I've been doing good since I've been out of prison the last 9 months. I've been taking it easy. I wish I could work. I've been doing therapy. I'm in a living assistant, a place over there on the south side. The South Health Redemption. So I would appreciate y'all listening to me and give some, you know, credence to that bill we're talking about. And I thank you very much.
Mr. Cheek, we thank you for coming. We thank you very much for sharing your story. Yes, we do. We sincerely appreciate it.
I appreciate it. I
think that will conclude the public hearing. Thank y'all so much for coming. We appreciate it. We appreciate that which you've told us. It means a lot to us. All right, Mr. Stringer's asked that we carry over 287. He said he had a little work to do on it. We're going to put it on a criminal subcommittee, let them work on it some. Senator Smitherman, you want to talk about Senate Bill 59?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and committee members for giving this bill consideration. I know that he's gone, but I just had to take a brief moment to say that Congressman Backus has done many special things for our state, has done an outstanding job. I have a personal thank you for him in that he presented the commission for circuit judgeship to my wife, and the significance of it. She's the first woman of color in our whole state's history to ever serve as a circuit judge. So it was very historical. And yes, he was still a Republican then. And yes, she was a D. You know,
she's done a good job, Senator Smithland. We appreciate her service.
And thank you very much. This bill is SB 59. This act should be known as the Personal Private Protection Act. This is a bipartisan legislation in every sense. The legislation prevents government overreach from targeting members of nonprofit organizations. The legislation prevents a fishing expedition by the public agency in targeting members of nonprofit organizations. This act prohibits public agencies from collecting, disclosing, or releasing personal information about members, volunteers, and financial and non-financial donors to 501c nonprofit organizations, except as required by law. This legislation came forth in conjunction with the Supreme Court's case, Americans for Prosperity Foundation versus Bonta, in which Alabama joined in support. The Supreme Court held that the disclosure of personal information must be narrowly tailored so as not to violate the donors. 14 other states have passed similar legislation since 2018, including our neighbors, Mississippi and Tennessee. Exceptions where the private information is allowed to be disclosed include the following: disclosure and reports required by the Fair Campaign Practice Act, lawful warrants, and lawful discovery request. The Attorney General office has reviewed and is satisfied with this legislation. And of course, there was a series of amendments that came. One of them being Amendment number 1, the universities and related health care systems authorities are excluded as public agencies. All related parties have agreed to the amendment. Amendment number 2 adds the word actual damages caused to the related form of relief. So, Mr. Chairman, I present this to the committee for their consideration. Or any questions?
Okay, hang on, Mr. Smithman.
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment for.
Sir.
I have an amendment.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. England. Let's talk about the amendment.
Senator Smithman alluded to, if you go to page 4 on line 99, after there are two, take out the period and add a comma, and it says, except that information that directly identifies a person as a donor of financial support to a nonprofit organization shall not be collected or disclosed unless expressly required by law or when required for a legitimate audit or investigative purpose, provided that such information shall only be used in connection with the specific audit or investigation to which the request relates and for any related proceedings.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt this amendment? I move. All right, there's a motion and a second. Thank you. Is there any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Mr. England, it's back to, excuse me. Senator Smithman, it's back to you with the, as amended. Sir.
Have a motion at the appropriate time.
I think we have it.
Motion to give the bill a favorable report is amended.
I'll give a second.
Okay, no, there's a motion and a second. Give this bill a favorable report as amended. Is there any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Senator Smithman, thank you so much. You got a favorable report as amended, okay?
Thank you, members, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, sir. Good to see you. Ms. Alban, would you do 266 for us, please, ma'am?
This is an Alabama Law Institute bill that was actually adopted last year This bill clarifies something that was part of that bill last year. Basically, last year's bill concerns matters that are removed from probate court to circuit court, either estates or will contests. And all this bill does is it says that so long as the will contest or estate is removed and in circuit court, if there are any subsequent filings regarding the removed matter, so long as they're still in circuit court, everything has to be filed in circuit court.
Any
That's pretty
questions
much it.
for Representative Alman? Yes, sir. All right, we got a motion second for a favorable report. Any more questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Okay, Representative Alman, thank you. You get a favorable report.
Thank you.
Mr. Wadsworth, what about due 262?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also members of the body. This bill is a bill to add one group to the bill that's been passed in the past. And what it is that currently, if you have like a 16-year-old or older, that they can be, and they assault a law enforcement officer, correctional officer, parole officer, juvenile probation officer, district attorney, a judge, or a court official, that they would be treated as an adult. This bill, what it does is it adds an employee of a juvenile detention center or the Department of Youth Services. Currently, there's very little that a juvenile detention center or the Department of Youth Services can do, but it just adds them and treats them the same under this bill as the other individuals that are identified in it.
All right, any questions for Mr. Wadsworth about this? Do it. Thank you. Motions, there's a second? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All right, any opposed? Favorable report, Mr. Wadsworth. Mr. England? How about 228? Folks, we got 267 we're carrying over. It's a bill concerning the Alabama Business Nonprofit Entity. Very thick bill. It's ALI bill. Some people said they wanted another week. Probably not to read it again, but nevertheless, they asked for another week, so we're going to give it to them. And the other one is the bill that we're continuing to work on dealing with the real estate sales tax issue, redemption. And so we will hopefully deal with those two next week, along with the two public hearings we've had and Representative Stringer's doxing bill. So, Mr. England, if you would, could we talk about House Bill 228?
Absolutely. House Bill 228 is another reasonable approach to dealing with our system of pardons, paroles, and now medical paroles. I think we're all aware that we have a very aged and infirm population in our prison system, and it's growing in size, and it's also growing in degree. As I mentioned earlier, we're talking about currently $1 billion contract to take care of individuals within our prison system, and quite frankly, we know that's not going to work. Interestingly enough, the new company is the old company. The new company is the one that got us in trouble in the first place. They changed their name and we hired them. So, House Bill 228 attempts to identify a population within the prison system and create a medical parole system for them, and it creates several requirements. It gives a review process for medical parole denials. If reviewed, it goes to the sentencing judge. It defines what a serious chronic health condition is, and we match the federal definition for that. And if denied, requires the parole board to give a reason to improve chances when they come back. It also creates a right to attend your parole hearing. And we can do that virtually through COVID. We created the mechanism throughout the state for virtual hearings all over the state of Alabama, and this would create that requirement for the pardons and parole. Also, if someone goes before the parole board and they're denied, right now, just about every person that's denied is arbitrarily assigned a 5-year waiting period for review. This would set that at 2, depending on the circumstances. So that's just a quick overview of the bill. There is an amendment for it at the appropriate time. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Let's do the amendment. Have you got the amendment? Okay, Mr. England, the amendment looks like to me.
It's technical. It's the wrong.
It is. It's just changing
the code section.
2532 to 122532. Is that correct?
Changing the code section, yes, sir.
So is there a motion to adopt it? All right, is there a second on adopting the amendment?
Second.
Thanks. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Okay, so your bill is amended. Back to you, Mr. England. Any questions for Mr. England, Mr. Faulkner?
Chris, where do the DAs or AG stand on this bill, 228? Do you know? I mean, it's
we're in conversations. I would tell you that they probably don't look upon it as favorably as I would like, if that's the answer to your question.
Okay.
But
I mean, if you know, or if you know they're opposed,
honestly, yeah. I haven't had any direct conversations with anybody from the AG's office and the Office of Prosecution Services, but I feel comfortable saying that they probably don't like it very much.
Okay.
Mr. Simpson, please.
I used to be, and there was a time in my life, and I regrettably used to feel that the age of 50 was old. But once I passed my 40th birthday, age of 50 doesn't seem so old anymore. And my issue with this bill and the concern I have with this bill is once an inmate is on line 278 on page 10, any prisoner denied parole who served at least 10 years of his sentence and has reached the age of 50 shall have a reconsideration parole hearing at least every 2 years. So we're calling 50 old to the extent of every time that somebody who's 50 or older that had served 10 years, no matter what they do in prison, they're coming up for their parole hearing again every 2 years. I think that's a stretch to go to 50.
Well, honestly, this is, we're also conversing. This is an opportunity. If you have any ideas or anything you think needs to be amended or changed, this is an opportunity for that. But I will also offer to you, though, that the number 50 isn't just an arbitrary number. It's based on years of study that indicate that once you hit the age of 50, criminality goes down. Like the likelihood of recidivism and reoffending goes down as you get older. So that's why. And again, some of the cases that go before the parole board, not all of them should be set off for 5 years. Because for some individuals, you set that case off for 5 years, that's effectively a death sentence. As an example, I think we're all aware of the fact that there was a woman that went before the parole board that was 71 years old, in a wheelchair, getting dialysis, basically terminally ill, satisfied the requirements for medical parole, not only denied, but then set off for 5 years. So effectively turns into a death sentence. And if the side of that about her being incarcerated and serving the last however many years of her life incarcerated and dying there, the other part of that, though, is obviously not a threat to public safety anymore. The fact that the parole board denied her is a tragedy in the sense that it's just not on the humanitarian side of that, but on the cost side of that, we're hospice care for that individual now. The money that's going to take to pay for her care will probably become prohibitively expensive because those folks multiply as we continue to deny parole. People get older and they get sicker. That's just one example of something that happens routinely. In the year last year, if I'm not mistaken, 70 people over the age of 70 came before the parole board. All but 6 were denied. And you see what happens, the multiplier effect in those costs make that $1 million we're spending, to make that $1 million we're spending on healthcare, prison healthcare, likely to be ineffective, and make sure that our prisons will never be large enough.
I agree with you that we have to do something to make sure we keep the cost down. But every person that you just mentioned was over the age of 70.
Yeah, no, that was just an example.
I know, but
and again, I told you the 50 is not an arbitrary number. It's based on years of study and evidence that indicate that people, once they hit the age of 50 and beyond, become less likely to reoffend.
Mr. England.
Yes, sir.
I've been before the parole board with folks, and the thing that concerned me is each side was given about 3 minutes apiece.
Yeah.
And the three members of the parole board took that information, said we're going to go in executive session. They all three turned around for about 10 seconds, and then they turned back around, denied, put off 5 years. And there was no mechanism for appeal, nothing. I mean, I thought it was the most unjust approach to in lack of consideration that was done. I had a client that spent 25 years on a manslaughter charge, and it was during a time that the stand your ground law didn't exist. There were 4 people. My client had a gun. There were 4 people on the other side, and he was put off 5 years, and he spent 25 years. Mm-hmm. I prefer 3 years. However, I think 2 years is more reasonable than put off 5 years with no recourse, nothing you can do. I support your bill. It probably surprises you, but I support your bill because I just think their people need an opportunity to at least find out what they've got to do, and given the limited amount of people that are being paroled right now.
Thank you.
Ms. McClammy, I think you had a question or comment, one or the other.
I did. I think it's been answered, but I'll just make the statement. First of all, I want to thank you for your bill. And secondly, I think it's already been answered about approximately how many people do we have with medical illnesses in our system that would be relieved if this bill so passes, and approximately how much are we spending taking care of them?
To be honest with you, it's almost impossible to know because it still has you still have to go before the review process. It does create a review with the sentencing judge if somebody's medical parole is denied. But I'm going to be honest with you, for the last few years, even through COVID, one of the least utilized tools that the Department of Corrections Commissioner has and the board has, to be honest with you, medical parole, furlough, and so forth, really not being used. At one point, there was like less than 10. So to kind of add to that, kind of create a procedure to identify those folks and to get them before the parole board so we can properly identify them quickly. And if they need to go back in and they're not ready to be released or they don't satisfy the requirements, instead of putting them on 5 years, we look at them again in 2. And again, it's a great question, and I wish I could answer it, but the fact of the matter is we're not taking away the subjective nature of the process. So the numbers could change. But I can guarantee you this, the number of individuals over the age of 50, over the age of 60, over the age of 70, as more people get denied, are going to grow, and the costs are going to become prohibitively expensive. And I wanted to also, I'm not going to Spencer Backus this thing, but yeah, I thought you were going to have to put it's not cool, by the way.
Hey, wait,
I thought you were going to have to put a motion in right now here.
In all seriousness, I don't want you to do that either, but Representative Backus has performed a service in this state that is certainly unparalleled by anybody in this room today.
Absolutely.
And I have the utmost respect for him, not that I always agree with him, but I still have the utmost respect.
I think you agree with all 20 minutes. Who's up here?
I listened intently all 20 minutes, yes, sir.
But for Representative Wadsworth, I think the other part of that review process that would make it more meaningful would be to require them to actually talk to, see so they can actually evaluate. And one of the, I say this all the time, if you're really interested in public safety, you have to have a meaningful parole system, because that's where you actually get a review of the applicant to have a better idea if that person is ready for release or not. You want to avoid mandatory release. You want to avoid EOS. What you want is them to be evaluated and say, that board, look at that person and say, you know what, you're ready to be released. And I think that's what we all should want. So.
Any further questions from anyone? Yes, sir, Mr. Faulkner, go ahead.
Representative England, you do, I mean, I find your intent in a lot of bills to be very respectable and worthy.
Oh, there it goes.
No, I have, I kind of see what you're trying to do here with the serious health condition, but I'm going to tell you, and I don't know that it helps you any, because I can't guarantee you that if you put this off a week that I could be a yes vote. But I feel I need time to have this looked at for myself before I could be a yes vote. And I'm not able to be a yes vote today. But I don't know. You may have no intention. Whatever it's whatever you want to do. I'm not going to make the motion unless you're agreeable to it. But I'm just saying, for me to be a yes vote on this, I need some more time.
Yeah.
And if you want to proceed, and the chairman wants to proceed, of course I'm subject to that.
Of course, I'm not in favor of putting the bill in the Chris England subcommittee, but I want to assure you, though, we're not reinventing the wheel here. This definition has already been tested, tried. It's a federal definition, and there was a reason for that, so we're not trying to recreate
What page is the definition on of that serious chronic condition?
11.
Hold on. I can actually read.
11?
Yeah.
11.
Yeah, I mean, so we're not reinventing the wheel here. It's a definition that's been used, tried, and, that's why, primarily the main reason that we used it.
Is the age of 50 a reinvention of the wheel, or was it?
No, again, that's not an arbitrary number. It's based upon.
Compared to other states.
Actually, I'll get that for you to find out. I know many states do offer a review at some age, and I'll have to get that for you.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Sanders.
Yeah, I've got a question. I took from your answer for Representative Faulkner earlier that you feel like that the AGs and the district attorneys are opposed. I mean, I don't know that you've had direct contact with them. Is that correct?
No, last year, they were very opposed with certain bills that I had. I wrote a couple of op-eds. This year, I haven't necessarily heard from anybody directly. I'm pretty sure they're going to want to talk to me now.
Well, I was just wondering if that was basically what I was wondering, if y'all have had any conversation about it or tried to work out, some of the differences, because I'm not sure what their differences are and with yours, and it would be important to me.
Sure, and that's fair. Traditionally, in my experience, they've been against just about any sort of reform measure. And quite honestly, I mean, they're a different role in this process. They're prosecutors. They're also, in a sense, representing the state, trying to represent the victim's interest. But overall justice is part of that discussion too. And so for what it's worth, they don't have the same concerns that we have, because we're obviously responsible for governing the system, which means it's a balance on both sides. Because if we can't effectively manage the system to create the resources necessary to incarcerate, then everything that we're doing here is for naught anyway. So,
well, I appreciate that. I just feel like it's important. I think it's an important part to know what that dialogue is and what they bring to it, and this issue especially. So, I agree with Representative Faulkner. I think that would give some more time would be important, to do that.
Mr. Wadsworth, excuse me, I'm sorry. Mr. Tillman, did I see that you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, thank you for the recognition. At the appropriate time, I move that this bill get a favorable rating.
All right, we're not quite there yet, but go ahead. We'll remember that. Go ahead, Mr. Wadsworth.
Mr. England,
Yes, sir.
If the age was moved to 60 and the time to be put off moved from 2 to 3 years, is that something you'd be inclined to do?
Sure. I mean, personally, I recognize that once you introduce a bill, it belongs to the body. And that is the will of the body, then I'm certainly bound to it.
Would you accept an amendment if we could do an amendment to it so we could get voted on it today, one way or the other?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
In light of that recent discussion, I would move that we put this bill off from today for a vote, and whether it's put into a subcommittee, but that would be my motion is that it be put off for a week, and whether that's in a subcommittee or not, so that these things can be further discussed.
Chris, there's two issues that I've picked up, okay, from
Yes,
what
sir.
people have said here and what other people have said to me. 2 years is not enough, or perhaps is not enough as far as the setback. 50 too young. Does this bill require either appearance at the parole board hearing by the individual or virtual appearance?
Yes.
Okay, and that's probably good. I would like to put it in our criminal subcommittee for 1 week. I know, Chris, I understand, but
Y'all aren't going to have no time to meet on all my bills in the subcommittee.
I make a motion we officially rename the committee the Chris England Subcommittee, please.
We're not going to do that, but I do want these two. I think those are the two sticking points, at least in my mind, right this second. And I would like for us to come to a time when we are able to come to a resolution. Because I'll be honest with you, I'd like to give this bill a favorable report, and I would like to send it to the floor of the House. So, Mr. England, with that, I think I have the ability to do that. Consequently, I am going to assign this to the criminal subcommittee. Mr. Wadsworth.
Yeah, I was going to mention we can meet on this criminal subcommittee next Tuesday at 11 if that would work with the committee.
Okay.
That'll work. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that concludes our meeting. I thank each and every one of you for coming, and we will reconvene next week and take up some more bills.